The first crack did not come from a raid. It came from a single line of data that should never have moved. If you are listening late at night, do not rush past this. Leave a comment if any detail feels wrong, and consider subscribing so you do not miss what the records suggest happened next. Because the story did not begin with violence. It began with stillness. In a forgotten registry office in Cambodia, paperwork aged in the dark the way fabric rots in humidity. The ceiling fan did not cool the room so much as push warm air from one corner to another. Dust clung to folders. Ink bled into paper fibers. And among those files, tucked beneath routine forms that were never meant to matter, a signature sat alone on a faded line. No headline followed it. No siren. No public warning. Just a name that, according to documents later examined by investigators, surfaced like a shadow in fog. Chen Zhi. We should be careful with names in cases like this. Many men can wear one. Many identities can borrow it. But what makes this entry different is the way it connects, as if a single stroke of ink had been wired to a machine already running. Investigators later traced the mark to a web of shell entities, more than 100 by some counts, scattered through Cambodia and Laos. Addresses led to empty lots or guarded compounds. Company names sounded clean. Their filings read like ordinary business. Yet the pattern beneath them did not behave like ordinary commerce. Transactions did not flow like wages or sales. They pulsed. They looped. They avoided the places where oversight lived. At the heart of the structure, court filings would later claim, sat a fortune in Bitcoin, estimated at 15,000 US. Not a scattered hoard, but concentration, a network of unhosted wallets, and a number that hangs in the air like a threat when you say it out loud. 127,071 BTC. In Phnom Penh, towers rose as if the city itself was trying to look away from the ground. Glass facades reflected the river's slow churn. Polished lobbies held their silence. Names like Prince Holding Group and Prince Bank sounded stable, modern, inevitable. But investigators began to suspect that beneath those clean lines, money moved through foundations without clear causes. Charities on paper, filters in practice, channels that could turn digital wealth into legitimate assets and back again, leaving the public with the illusion of progress. In Laos, the trail sank into heat and distance. Remote facilities where mining rigs could hum for months without drawing the wrong kind of attention. Electricity pulled hard from the grid. Servers working in the dark, converting stolen power into digital gold. The operation did not need spectacle. It needed continuity, and continuity depends on control. According to forensic reporting referenced in later investigations, the seed phrases that guarded the core wallets were not distributed. They were not delegated. They were held close, like state secrets, by a single figure at the center. One man, one vault, one failure point that no one believed would ever fail. What started as routine verification, a mismatch in a transfer, the kind of anomaly that usually dies in a spreadsheet, began to feel like a quiet warning. Something had moved that was not supposed to move. Something had slipped in the silence. And once a system like this is disturbed, it does not merely react. It adapts. The first crack did not come from a raid. It came from a single line of data that should never have moved. What followed that first crack did not resemble a chase. There were no warrants on doors, no flashing lights. It unfolded instead in a windowless room, beneath fluorescent bulbs that hummed with the same dull persistence as the servers lining the walls. December 2020. In a cyber forensics lab outside Washington, analysts worked through the quiet hours that exist only between midnight and dawn. Screens glowed with ledger entries. Rows of numbers marched downward in disciplined order. Most anomalies died quickly. A mistyped address, a delayed confirmation, noise. But one transfer refused to settle into explanation. It was small by the standards of global finance. Subtle. A movement of Bitcoin from an unhosted wallet tied, loosely at first, to infrastructure in Laos. The originating label on the internal dashboard read Warp Data Technologies. On paper, a mining operation. On paper, legitimate. Yet the flow behaved strangely, not like mined Bitcoin gradually entering circulation. It moved in clusters. Sudden, concentrated, as if released in haste rather than harvested by routine. The analysts flagged it, not because it was large, but because it was wrong. What followed was procedure. Cross-reference the wallet. Check prior activity. Compare timestamps against known mining cycles. The room remained quiet. No alarms. Just the soft percussion of keys and the constant hum of cooling fans. Then the pattern widened. From December 7th onward, transfers cascaded. Thousands of coins shifted between wallets with no hosted exchange in sight. No customer service desk. No compliance layer. Only raw movement, controlled entirely by whoever held the seed phrases. According to later reports compiled from Department of Justice filings, approximately 1,021 BTC disappeared in that window alone. At first glance, it looked like theft, an insider breach. Analysts would later suggest. Not a foreign intrusion, not a state-sponsored attack. Someone inside the operation. A technician, an operator. A person who understood the rhythm of the machines and the blind spots of oversight. Someone who knew when the data would not be watched. But theft leaves fingerprints, panic, fragmentation. This movement did not scatter. It consolidated. The coins flowed into wallets that behaved as if guided by a single hand. No hesitation, no testing. The precision suggested confidence, not desperation. That detail shifted the tone inside the room. This was not a smash and grab. It was exposure. As analysts traced the paths, the digital trail bent south. Laos first, then Cambodia. Infrastructure metadata tied wallet activity to power grids near remote server farms along the Mekong Basin. Facilities that drew electricity at levels inconsistent with their declared operations. Consumption spikes aligned with mining output. The numbers matched too closely to dismiss. The team paused. A cybercrime report was filed. Routine, the kind that rarely grows teeth. Interpol was notified, as protocol required. But the case did not stay quiet, because the wallets did not stop moving. Transfers resurfaced weeks later, in places that should not have touched raw mining output. Real estate escrow accounts, foundation-linked wallets, digital assets converted, layered, fragmented. The flows did not vanish. They learned to wear masks. Investigators began to map them. One address led to 10 to hundreds. Each hop added distance, not randomness. The structure felt engineered, designed to be followed only by those patient enough to endure the silence between movements. And then a name appeared again, not boldly, not in an arrest record or a press release, in fragments. A beneficiary line on a foundation document. A signatory field on a transfer form recovered during a later raid. Chen Zhi, or Chen Zhi, depending on the transliteration. Never centered, always adjacent. The implication hardened when analysts confirmed the custody model. According to forensic summaries compiled after the fact, the core wallets were not managed by committee. There was no multi-signature governance, no distributed trust. The seed phrases were held personally, no delegation. No redundancy, a design choice that defied best practice, but ensured absolute control. One man, one vault. That detail reframed the breach. If the Lubian hack, as it came to be called internally, was an insider theft, it was also a message, a crack in an architecture that depended entirely on loyalty. And loyalty, unlike code, decays. As the trail expanded, a second layer emerged. The hacked funds began to intersect with reports from financial intelligence units tracking pig butchering scams. Victims across continents had reported similar patterns. Romance cultivated online. Investment opportunities whispered through private messages. Crypto deposits requested, then vanished. Until now, those losses had dispersed into the noise of global fraud. Now they converged. Wallets linked to scam proceeds fed into the same channels as the mined Bitcoin. Different origins, identical exits, a single system ingesting dirty money from multiple directions and exhaling legitimacy through the same narrow vents. The room grew quieter as that realization settled. This was not a collection of crimes. It was a machine. Analysts worked through nights, mapping flows with the patience of surgeons. Each line on the screen represented a choice made months or years earlier. Each hop revealed intent. The longer they watched, the clearer the rhythm became. long chains for accumulation, short bursts when something went wrong, and something had gone wrong. What began as a flagged anomaly in a routine blockchain audit had become pursuit. Memos circulated. Monitor warp data. Monitor the Cambodian real estate arms. Monitor the foundations. Financial intelligence units in Southeast Asia began to pay attention. The system had been disturbed, but it had not yet panicked. What looked like a theft was not an end. It was an invitation. Once the system revealed itself, it became difficult to see anything else. Investigators stopped asking who had stolen what. They began asking how the machine breathed. In Laos, the answer hummed in the dark. Remote facilities sat beyond the reach of routine inspection, wrapped in jungle and distance. On lease agreements, they were data centers. On balance sheets, innovation hubs. Inside, rows of application-specific integrated circuits worked without pause. Their heat vented into the night. Electricity flowed in volumes that strained local grids, siphoned quietly, sometimes subsidized, sometimes stolen outright. According to later audits, the consumption curves aligned too precisely with Bitcoin output to be coincidence. This was industrial mining, scaled not for profit alone, but for control. Each solved block added to a reservoir of digital wealth that did not need banks, borders, or permission. Untaxed, unreported, and, for a time, unseen. The coins did not sit idle. They moved with intent. From Laos, the flows bent south and outward. Shell companies activated like switches. More than 100 entities, investigators would later estimate, nested within one another like dolls. Names designed to disappear into paperwork. Global Tech Ventures, Mekong Investments, foundations with charitable language and no measurable impact. A transfer entered one layer and emerged altered. Split, fragmented, routed through jurisdictions where oversight thinned. Singapore's financial infrastructure appeared again and again, not as an origin, but as a filter. Algorithms tumbled transactions, mixing them with legitimate flows until provenance blurred. Offshore accounts in the British Virgin Islands and Seychelles absorbed the output, balances swelling without explanation. Victims never saw this part. Their stories began elsewhere, on dating platforms, on investment forums. Conversations built slowly. Trust cultivated. Then came the ask. A crypto deposit, a promise, and silence. The pig butchering model, as financial intelligence units came to call it, fed the machine with fresh capital drawn from across the world. California, London, Toronto, Canberra. The deposits vanished, but the value did not. It entered the system, indistinguishable from mined Bitcoin within days. The machine did not care where the blood came from. Cambodia provided the anchor. In Phnom Penh, glass towers transformed the skyline. Real estate absorbed volatility, the way bone absorbs impact. Apartments along the river, condominiums marketed to foreign investors. Prices inflated, flipped, inflated again. Investigators later matched wallet deposits from scam victims to property acquisitions months later, the appreciation curves mirroring laundering cycles. Prince-branded entities sat at the center of this conversion. Bank loans that never required repayment. Subsidiaries lending to subsidiaries. Foundations donating to causes that led nowhere, except back into the network. According to court filings, millions in cryptocurrency equivalents passed through these channels, all disguised as development funding. No schools built, no clinics staffed, just paper trails. Where digital pathways ended, physical movement began. Cash mules crossed borders through Thailand and Laos, suitcases heavy, paperwork light. Casino floors in coastal zones converted digital gains into bills. Couriers moved at night. Ports accepted crates mislabeled as electronics. Yacht manifests listed leisure, not logistics. Each step bridged gaps where blockchain could not go, ensuring continuity. Bribery kept the gears aligned. Recovered ledgers, pieced together from encrypted drives seized in later raids, listed gifts with clinical precision. Luxury watches for regulators. Overseas tuition for relatives. Villas deeded under proxies. Electricity audits waived. Border checks softened. According to investigators, influence replaced force. No threats were needed when silence could be purchased. The elegance of the system lay in its redundancy. If one route clogged, another opened. When Singapore mixes came under scrutiny, flows diverted through crypto bridges in Eastern Europe. Stablecoins substituted when volatility spiked. Non-fungible tokens, auctioned in art markets, washed proceeds through culture instead of commerce. Remittances disguised as family aid crossed channels no one wanted to inspect too closely. The machine adapted faster than policy. Inside analysis rooms, the architecture took shape. Long chains for accumulation. Short bursts when intervention threatened exposure. Diagrams filled digital whiteboards. Arrows snaked from server farms in Laos to boardrooms in Cambodia, then leapt to free zones in Dubai. Electricity logs matched wallet activity. Bank records repeated the same patterns under different names. The numbers stabilized around a figure that hardened into consensus. $15 billion. Not static wealth, but kinetic. Always moving, always mutating, always one step ahead of the hand reaching for it. According to estimates later referenced by prosecutors, this was not the full extent of the empire, only what could be seen through the cracks. And, at the center, control remained concentrated. The seed phrases guarding the core wallets were not distributed among lieutenants. They were not locked behind institutional safeguards. They were held personally. According to forensic reports, no backups had been formally delegated. The design ensured absolute authority, but it also created a single point of failure that no one believed would be tested. Until it was. As sanctions lists expanded and monitoring intensified, internal stress surfaced. Transfers hesitated. Timing slipped. Small inconsistencies appeared where none had existed before. The machine did not collapse. It tightened. But systems built on secrecy do not fracture from pressure alone. They fracture when trust erodes, and somewhere within the layers of shell companies, mining farms, and financial fronts, a human decision waited. The empire did not expand by force. It expanded because no one was watching the silence. Betrayal rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, shaped like routine, hidden inside permissions that no one thinks to question. In systems built on secrecy, the most dangerous figure is not an enemy outside the walls, but a person who already knows where the doors are. They would later call it the Sparrow's flight. Not in press conferences or indictments. The name surfaced in internal briefings, whispered more than spoken. A placeholder for something no one could fully see. There was no dramatic defection, no midnight escape, just data moving when it should not have moved again, and this time with intent. The Lubian hack of December 2020 had been the tremor. This was the aftershock. Somewhere inside the network, an operator decided to leave, or to be heard, or simply to survive. Investigators never agreed on motive. The files did not explain resentment, fear, or conscience. They only showed action. During dead hours, copies were made, ledgers mirrored, drives filled slowly to avoid detection. The extraction was careful, disciplined, as if the person understood exactly how much disruption the system could tolerate before noticing. According to later intelligence summaries, the data crossed borders on something as unremarkable as a thumb drive, passed hand to hand until it reached a safe house in Vienna. By the time forensic teams opened the package, the Sparrow was already gone. The files were not vast. They did not overwhelm with volume. What made them lethal was precision. Bribery ledgers, raw, unredacted, entries written with the calm confidence of people who never expected scrutiny. Dates, amounts, initials, a catalog of influence, rendered in ink and spreadsheet cells. Yacht charters in Monaco were listed not as leisure, but as transfers. Villas in Portugal appeared alongside permit approvals in Laos. Tuition payments for relatives aligned with electricity, audits that never happened. According to analysts who reviewed the material, this was not corruption in the abstract. It was accounting. One entry drew particular attention. A multi-million-dollar wire, masked as a consulting fee, routed through a Prince-affiliated entity, and linked directly to wallets controlled by the same seed phrases at the center of the mining operation. The chain closed. What had been suspected hardened into structure. As the data circulated among task forces, the tone shifted. This was no longer inference. Europol units cross-referenced the ledgers with wire intercepts. Financial investigators in Singapore matched entries to frozen transactions. Agents in Los Angeles aligned scam victim reports with wallet addresses exposed in the leak. Each confirmation tightened the net. The machine began to turn inward. The files revealed fractures investigators had not anticipated. Associates skimming from smuggling runs. Partners double-counting on real estate flips. Seed phrases duplicated in unauthorized backups. Control, once absolute, had eroded quietly under the weight of scale. The empire had grown too large to remain loyal. In analysis rooms, the hum of servers underscored the shift. What had been a patient pursuit sharpened. Sanctions lists expanded overnight. New entities blacklisted before their paperwork could be revised. Financial arteries constricted. Transactions stalled mid-flow, frozen in the act. Yet even as pressure mounted, the Sparrow remained absent. The files ended abruptly. Mid-entry. A Dubai transfer incomplete. No explanation. No farewell. Investigators debated whether the leak represented courage or calculation. Whether the insider had fled, been extracted, or been silenced. The system offered no answer. What it did offer was ignition. The investigation accelerated from observation to strike planning. Cooperation deepened across borders. Agencies that once shared summaries now shared live data. Time zones blurred. Decisions compressed. The silence that had protected the machine began to collapse under coordination. And still, there was no spectacle. No single moment marked the fall. Only preparation. The Sparrow had not dismantled the empire. That had never been possible. What the leak had done was strip away ambiguity. It had removed the doubt that allowed inaction to masquerade as caution. Inside briefing rooms, one assessment circulated with increasing confidence. The architecture was exposed. The flows were mapped. The names were anchored. All that remained was timing. When the insider spoke, the machine did not scream. It simply began to bleed. The strike did not arrive like a storm. It moved instead like a shadow passing across time zones, synchronized without ceremony. In secure briefings, the operation carried a name that few outside the task forces would ever hear spoken aloud. Operation Prince, a designation chosen not for drama but for precision. It marked the conglomerate that anchored the empire's physical form, the place where digital value became concrete and glass. Washington moved first. At dawn, indictments were unsealed with no press conference to follow. Warrants targeted the digital veins of the network. According to official filings, unhosted wallets holding 127,071 BTC were frozen in place, their value locked beyond reach. Seed phrases that once conferred absolute control became irrelevant under coordinated sanctions. Bridges collapsed quietly. The largest cryptocurrency forfeiture in United States history occurred without a single door being kicked in. London followed as the morning fog lifted. Financial crime units moved on offshore echoes, freezing accounts routed through shell entities registered in the British Virgin Islands. Properties tied to laundering cycles were seized. Villas stood empty. Deeds stalled mid-transfer. Denials flowed through legal representatives, polished and immediate, but the balances did not return. Singapore acted next. Regulators intervened with surgical restraint, revoking licenses, halting mixers, and detaining transactions already in motion. Boardrooms emptied. Laptops were removed from desks while screens still glowed. According to investigators, ledgers recovered there matched the Sparrow's files with unnerving accuracy. The Asian artery severed, forcing reroutes that collapsed under scrutiny. In Laos, the machine finally went dark. Mining facilities that had hummed for years fell silent as power was cut and equipment seized. Rows of application-specific integrated circuits cooled where they stood. Electricity logs subpoenaed during raids confirmed what audits had long suggested. The grid had been bled for profit. The cost had simply been deferred. Cambodia felt the pressure last. Phnom Penh's skyline did not shatter. Towers remained standing, but inside, lobbies emptied. Vaults were sealed. Condominiums along the river froze mid-sale, their paper value dissolving under liens. Prince-branded entities issued statements of denial, invoking politics and overreach. The market did not respond. Silence returned, heavier than before. Across borders, associates scattered. Cash mules abandoned routes. Safe houses emptied. A luxury yacht slipped its moorings in Dubai under cover of rain. Ownership obscured behind layers of proxies. Private flights departed without destination filed. Interpol notices lit up airports from Bangkok to Brussels, but the central figure remained absent. Chen Zhi did not appear in handcuffs. He surfaced only in dockets, in frozen balance, in references to control once held and now lost. The empire's wealth, estimated at $15 billion, pooled under custodianship. According to prosecutors, this represented the largest single seizure from crypto's shadow economy. According to investigators, it was incomplete. Because systems like this do not vanish, they adapt, fragment, and wait. The dust settled without celebration. Markets twitched, then stabilized. Bitcoin dipped, then recovered. New wallets appeared elsewhere. New shells registered under different names. In the quiet aftermath, one assessment lingered in internal reports. What had been dismantled was not an anomaly. It was a prototype. The empire fell, but the blueprint remained.